the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast. This is a show that helps you become an even more awesome driving instructor and run a better driving school. As always, I am your very tired host, Terry Cook. I'm delighted to be here, even more delighted that you have chosen to listen because we are continuing on our journey into the road safety sector and looking at ways that we can incorporate road safety not just into our driving lessons, but into our driving schools and beyond. And I'm delighted to say that Season 7 is sponsored by Bright Coaching. To find out more about Bright Coaching and check out their professional diploma, head over to brightcoaching.net. And while you're there, make sure you sign up to the newsletter as well to keep up to date with all the latest info and resources they have to offer. But on today's show, we are joined by Lucy Straker of Break, the road safety charity. And we're talking all things graduated driving licenses. So anything you could possibly want to know, we pretty much cover for you on today's episode, including me throwing some of the most common concerns around graduated driving licenses at Lucy and hearing her response. Really interesting part of the show that really enjoyed hearing Lucy answer some of those points. But we also talk a little bit about Break and what they do, and we look at how we can better support Break and promote Break. But we also look at the resources and the stuff that Break has to offer us as driving instructors as well, and how they currently support us. So really cool talk with Lucy today. But just before we get stuck into the episode, I want to ask you to go and check out the Instructor Podcast website. That's www.theinstructorpodcast.com. Over there, you can find links to all the previous episodes, loads of free resources, as well as links to sign up to the Instructor Podcast newsletter and the WhatsApp channel. You'll find blog posts over there with links for stuff for the episodes, and you'll find more information about the different premium tiers that we offer. That's www.theinstructorpodcast.com. But for now, let's get stuck into the show. Today on the Instructor Podcast, I am joined by Lucy Straker, who is the campaign manager for the road safety charity Break. How are we doing, Lucy?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All the better for seeing your smiley face. And you're someone I've wanted on this podcast for a while, and it seemed specifically apt to get you on during the road safety season. So big thank you for joining me today, and particularly wanting to talk around graduated driving licenses or GDLs. So let's start off with a nice big open question for you. What is a graduated driving license?
Well, a graduated driving license is a proposed piece of policy or legislation that essentially looks at young drivers who are aged between 17 and 24, from the moment they kind of get their license. And it just puts in a number of safeguards around them to kind of help them transition from that being in that learning environment to being out on the road all by themselves. And instead of just moving it from one step to another, it's just there as a graduated way to bring them into kind of that driving world and just putting some safeguards around them where we know that there are struggles to be had. So, for example, things like we know that there's a high risk of crashing during the night. There's a high risk of crashing if you've got a car full of similar aged people within the car. So there's all those kind of things. We know that they're an issue. We know also that that age group are disproportionately represented in road casualty statistics. Drivers aged 17 to 24 make up 6% of total license holders, yet represent 18% of all car drivers killed or seriously injured. So you can see the kind of disproportionate between the two. So we know that they're more likely to be affected. We know that I think it's 1 in 5 crash within their first year. So all these things we know. So if we know that they're more at risk, how do we put some safeguards in place to help and support them? And then that's what a graduated driving license would do.
I've seen a lot of, well, not a lot. I've seen a few petitions. I've seen a lot of campaigns for graduated driver licenses. And one thing that I'm curious about is there one set of measures that kind of everyone's agreed this is what we're campaigning for? Or are people more campaigning for let's just get something over the line?
Well, I think it's quite nuanced, like a lot of things. I think there's a kind of like probably a core nucleus of measures that people would like to see, things around the hazard perception training, the minimum kind of learning period as well, I was only having a conversation yesterday about how somebody can go through like a crash course. I use inverted commas on that because it's a really badly worded kind of thing. And, learn to drive very quickly. They learn the skills maybe, but not necessarily kind of the emotional and the kind of broader thinking in that time period. Because as we all know, I'm a driver as well. I drive a car, and I know that if I'm driving in the dark, or if I'm driving in kind of a low sun, or if it's icy, or if it's raining, or if it's foggy, all of those factors will have an impact on your kind of decisions of driving. So if you've not got experience of that in a learning environment, it's very hard to kind of then just know exactly what to do in that situation. So that's why we encourage people to have like a minimum learning period, so that they go through all of that and they experience all of that in that learning environment before being out on the road by themselves or in a car full of people, which is then very distracting as well. So that minimum learning period, the restrictions around driving at night, kind of between the hours of like, I think 10 p.m. and like 6 a.m., those kind of things. And then also that car full of peer-aged people as well. They're probably the main ones, I think, and plus the hazard perception training as well, because that's something that's, as you know, is very helpful to learn kind of people developing those skills as well. So all of those factors together are probably, I'd say, the core nucleus of a graduated driving license. And that's what's kind of been put in places like New Zealand and Canada and parts of the US as well. So
Do you think the fact that it's that nuance can potentially be a stumbling block? Because I know that some instructors have told me they wouldn't sign a petition until they knew exactly what they were petitioning for. Whereas as my approach is simply, I'd rather have something than nothing. But do you think that the fact that it is that nuance can prove a stumbling block?
Well, I think it possibly can. I mean, there are kind of limitations when you put forward a petition, specifically on the parliamentary website. You have very limited characters that you can use. It has to go to the Parliament for them to approve the petition wording for it to go on as well. So there's lots of little barriers like that maybe aren't quite as known. So you can't necessarily put all the information in there. But my kind of point to that is that these petitions are there to get the debate into Parliament, and at the moment the debate isn't happening in Parliament, and it needs to be. It's not happening. It's happening outside. It's happening in the media. It's happening among road safety experts and those kind of things. But it's not happening in Parliament, which is where the change can really happen. And so this is a good way for us. It's not the only way, but it's a good way for us to get that discussion into where change can actually happen. And that's what we encourage people to do. You might not agree with all the nuances, but it's going to go through many different iterations within Parliament before it ever came into law anyway. But let's get that discussion into where change can actually happen.
I think you were kind of telling me before a little bit about the response of government to the petition that's gone through. So do you want to just tell me a little bit more about that now?
Yeah, so the petition that I'm kind of referencing in this one is the one by Crystal Owen about progressive licensing systems. And once you hit 10,000 signatures, the government responds, which they have done to Crystal's, because at last check, she was over 22,000 signatures. And they talked about how young driver death has reduced over the last 10 years and how, we have some of the safest roads in Europe. Now, when we look at the statistics for 2022, which is the latest road casualty statistics that we have, because the 2023 will come out in September, it actually tells us that just under 5,000 people were killed or seriously injured in crashes involving at least one young driver. So these numbers are almost equally split between the young driver or their passenger and other road users as well. So, for example, people travelling in separate cars or maybe pedestrians and those kind of things. So what the government have done is they've told us about young driver figures on that response. But what they've not talked about is the kind of the wider perspective of that. So these crashes happen. They're not going to happen in isolation. So the other people, the other road users that are being included within, kind of involved in these crashes as well, and being killed and being seriously injured. So when you look at that, nearly 5,000 people, that's not good enough, and that's not being represented in that response as well. So that's something that we just really want to kind of push forward and make sure people are all aware of that. Like, these things don't happen in isolation. Sometimes they do. Sometimes it is just the young driver in their car, but not always. There is other people on the road, and every life is valuable. And every life should be able to be saved. Every crash is preventable, and that's what we want people to look at and not think, oh, that's not a bad amount of figures. It's like, no deaths and no serious injuries. That's what we're kind of campaigning for. That vision zero is really, really important.
I mean, I don't want to get too political on this one, but does it frustrate you when you hear the government talking about UK's got some of the safest roads, which is obviously a good thing, that we do have some of the safest roads, but almost saying, well, that makes it acceptable for 5 people a day to die. Do you find that frustrating?
I do, because, again, going back to the 2022 statistics, if you look at the people who were killed, there was 1,766 people killed on our roads in 2022. And that was a 10% increase from 2021, and that for us, that's not like sales figures or anything like that. That's people's lives. So that's 1,766 families, communities, schools, workplaces, all these people. Road death is so sudden and traumatic and sends shockwaves right across communities, schools, workplaces, and all those kind of things. We have communities that raise money for us that, for crashes that happened, 10, 15 years ago, because it's still so raw, it's still it's still felt across the community. And we released some statistics only the other day that said, there's 9 young children are harmed on our roads every day. And then when I say young children, that's 7 and under. That's 9 every day. This is not acceptable. You wouldn't accept that if it was any other mode of transport and these kind of things were happening. If this was in the aviation field, for example, you wouldn't say, well, that's all right, I suppose. It's like, it's not okay. 5 people don't make it home today, and 5 people won't make it home tomorrow. That's not acceptable. And, when things are going up as well, these crash statistics are going up, we're saying we need to have a road safety framework. We need to be pushing towards road vision zero. We've got these targets set globally. We need to be working towards that and really pushing for no deaths on our roads. That should be the goal for everybody across government, across everybody, across every community, really.
Why do people accept it then? In particular, the higher ups, for lack of a better expression. Why is it accepted, and yet people like you and I don't accept it?
Well, my personal, I work a lot with families who've been affected by road death. I see the impact that it has. Brake has the National Road Victim Service. We kind of support like 1,000 families every year, over 1,000 families every year, and it's going up and up and up. And when you see that kind of the impact that this has on families and communities, you realize that this is not acceptable. But I think, I personally, I think we all have to use the road. Everybody uses the road. Even the king uses the road. We have to go out onto the road pretty much every single day. And most journeys that you do are absolutely fine. I've been out today, I've come back, everything's been absolutely fine. And we do that quite often, and we kind of almost have to kind of live with the fact that there is danger on the road, and maybe that's just how we cope with it. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, but all I just want to say to people is just safety should be the primary kind of factor in every decision making that you make on the road. Whether you're walking or cycling or driving or whatever you may be, safety should be the most important thing. Getting there is better than it should be the only outcome that we accept, basically.
And graduated driving licenses is a step to reducing those road deaths, isn't it? In the countries it's been in, so the States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, there has been a decrease in deaths and collisions as a result of GDLs.
Yes. We've had, I think, kind of in different countries have between kind of 25 to 40% reduction in deaths on the road when a graduated driving license of some kind of format has been implemented. So the evidence is there that it works, and that's why we feel like it should be a no-brainer for the government to implement here. Because if we've got young driver deaths at the height that it is, we need to kind of get that down. And this is a proven way to reduce death and harm on our roads through kind of like the young driver.
Do you think that people are potentially viewing these graduate driver licenses as part of this? Oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this war on motorists that we're hearing about now.
Possibly. I think The narrative over the past few years around graduated drivers has been focusing a lot on what they think is like the restrictions on young people, restrictions of freedoms, preventing them from accessing work or education and those kind of things. But we've got evidence that shows that only 13% of 17 to 19-year-olds, for example, who hold full driving licenses report driving to work between the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. So the restrictions are very, very low. And we work with businesses and and they're very, very supportive of graduated driving licenses. I've spoken to some businesses who we almost tried to implement it into their working policy. And, there's this restriction element, I think, doesn't affect that many of the people that we're talking about. What does restrict them is if they die on the road. That's massive restrictions. They will never be able to work again, because, their life is cut short. And that is the biggest restriction for us. And there's ways around these things. So in other countries, they've had like work exemptions, for example. Like you can still be, some drivers have been able to drive for work during the night, but not be able to have passengers and those kind of things. So there's ways around them. If it's in other countries, they've found that legal route around these kind of so-called issues. So again, it goes back to that. If we put something in place around graduated driving licenses, it's better than not having anything, which is what we have at the moment. We don't have any restrictions, any kind of safeguards or anything like that. I mean, if you started a job or if you went to go and learn something, you would have like an induction period. You wouldn't just be like, oh, here you go, off you go with this, whatever it is. You would have an induction period. You would have a minimum period of learning. And so we should apply that to this as well, to driving, because it can be something. It can be really, really dangerous if we're not careful. So that's why we kind of call for this. We don't think it's as restrictive as people kind of flag it up to be, especially if you look at the broader picture of 18% of people dying on our roads are within that age group as well. So I think that's the most restrictive thing, and that's the message we'd like to get across to anybody who does have those kind of concerns.
I mean, I must admit, since getting more involved in the road safety sector and that side of it, I've noticed that I'm needing to change my language a little bit. So things like accidents are going out the window and it's collision. And even with this, so when I'm making my notes for the show today, I've written down several times restrictions, then deleted it and replaced it with measures, because it's not that restrictive. And the other thing is, we're not talking about 6 years of these measures. I know it's like 6 months or 12 months in various countries. It's not like draconian, drastic things. It's just easing people in. But I'd be keen to get your thoughts on this, actually, because there isn't a graduated driving license system in place at the minute, so we can't enforce this stuff. But I think driving instructors can still be doing it. So we can still be taking students on nighttime lessons. We can still be doing lessons in rush hour traffic specifically. We can do all this other stuff that wouldn't be. It's not incorporated by the DVSA. It's not in their Ready to Pass campaign. It's not necessarily promoted by parents and stuff like that. But we can be encouraging it. So I'd be interested if you think that's something we should be encouraging, considering it's not mandatory.
Yeah, I mean, I would wholeheartedly support that. I think anything that we can do kind of until graduated driving licenses come in, I think we'll only support it. I mean, I was speaking to parents of children whose children have died on the road, and they've said, like, if we knew that about the statistics, and we knew that something like the graduated driving license, we could have applied that ourselves. Like I know parents who said, right, I'm not going to allow my child to apply for the test until they've been doing lessons for a year. Like there's ways that we can do it to kind of bring it into play already. But then the other argument is that we shouldn't have to. That's why we have legislation. That's why we have policy, in so that if we know that something works well, that we can bring it in. But until that day comes, then yes, I would encourage people to just promote the benefits of a graduated driving license. Like I say, there's some companies that say, okay, we're going to make sure that if we've got a young person who's just passed their test, we're not going to ask them to drive another group of young people around for work, and they fit that into their policies as well, and saying, like, again, until the graduated driving license comes in, we're going to apply one ourselves, or kind of a version of that. So yes, please do that, because the more people are doing that, then hopefully we'll kind of show that it isn't as restrictive as people kind of put out there, and that there is that kind of public support. That's one of the big things, especially to get into Parliament, especially to get into legislation. Like, does it have public support? And the more support that we can get behind it, the better.
I must admit, I got a message from a parent recently, and when I opened it up, I saw the number 46, and my mind's immediately gone, right, okay, they're now quoting the average number of hours, and great, and kind of my heart sinks a little bit. But then when I read it, it was such an amazing message, because she was talking about, this is the average, so I want her to have 46 hours with you before I take her out in my car. And then when we both agree, and she agrees that we're fit to drive, then we'll book a test. I don't care if there's a 6 month. I'm like, what an amazing attitude. And you're right. I think there might be a lot of the public that might not be happy with this, but I think there's a lot that will get on board. And like you said, they don't see the dangers. I had Sharon Huddleston, who's been featured on the Brake website, and she was saying that same thing. And it was almost heartbreaking hearing her saying it. If I knew this, my daughter wouldn't have been in that car. And it's just a heartbreaking thing to hear. But I want to ask you this as well then, because, and I'm not meaning to put you on the spot with this one, but you know, you are the campaign manager at Brake. I'm just wondering if there's scope somewhere for someone to campaign for that, or for it to be promoted elsewhere other than driving instructors. Because if as a driving instructor, if I start preaching on my social media and saying you should be having 60 hours as a minimum or 100 hours of a minimum, there's going to be an awful lot of Joe public that goes, well, someone's after some more money, someone's short on customers. So I'm just wondering if there's scope for someone else to be doing that, and then us as instructors supporting it.
Yeah, I mean, first off, to say that Sharon Huddleston is one of my favorite people in the world. She's such a tremendous human being who has worked so hard for graduated driving licenses, and she's just such a wholehearted soul. Absolutely love her to pieces. And yes, you know, we talk about it a lot. I know there's other organisations such as the RAC Foundation talk very, you know, Liz Box, which I think you've had Liz on your show as well, like talks very, very openly and positively about, you know, the need for graduated driving licenses. The AA Foundation pulled out a report recently, you know, so we're out there talking about it. We welcome driving instructors talking about it as well. Again, anybody. I was, like I say, I was in meetings yesterday talking about how we'd love to see more people out there talking about why minimum driving periods are so important. We get the challenge of, well, is it exclusionary because it costs and those kind of things? But the way we say it is that it's like, say, it's not just paid lessons. You know, I was very lucky because my dad was actually a driving instructor, so he was able to take me out as well. Kind of aside from, I had paid lessons with another person as well, because otherwise that's just not helpful, kind of being in the car with your dad all the time. And so, yeah, it's about kind of everybody having that message, everybody helping and supporting. There's all the ways that people can help and support young drivers and taking them out and those kind of things. We would just push for everybody to talk about graduated driving licenses, everybody to talk about, sign the petition that Crystal's got going. It talks about that as well. It talks about why it's so important. Brake website, we've got it on our website. So, you know, if as a driving instructor, you're talking about why it's required, and people are saying, like you say, you know, oh, you just want some more money, you can point them to the Brake website. It's all on there. It says why it's important, why the need for these kind of longer learning periods is so important. And then ultimately, we would love the DVSA or the government to come out and say, this kind of minimum period is important. So, yeah, we just got to all keep talking about it, really, and get those messages across to parents, to young drivers, or whoever needs to hear it, basically.
We'll be back with more from Lucy in just a moment, but I want to give a shout out to some of the latest sign-ups to the Instructor Podcast Premium, and they are Salim, Scott Knowles, Chris Joyce, and Shahram. So a big thank you to those guys for signing up. and deciding to upgrade their CPD with a membership to the Instructor Podcast Premium. If you would like to kickstart your CPD, you too can join, and the best place to do that is at the website www.theinstructorpodcast.com. Over there, you'll find all the information, details, and links you could ever need, but you can also head to the show notes for this episode and find links over there. Once you've signed up, you'll immediately get access to over 75 hours of exclusive content to help you become a better driving instructor and run a better driving school. And you can stream that content and have full access through the membership site, or you can listen directly on Apple Podcasts, or you can head over to Spotify Podcasts and you can listen there too and watch the videos through Spotify as well. You can do this on your phone, on your tablet, on a laptop or PC, and once you've got it all set up, you can even stream it through your television too. So, not only is it the best value CPD around, it also gives you the best access and potentially the easiest access as well. So, definitely go and check that out, www.theinstructorpodcast.com. And just a reminder, there is a week's free trial with no obligation to stay. So if within that first week you decide you don't like it, you can always leave. But I also want to take a moment to give a big shout out to brightcoaching.net, who have been the sponsors throughout Season 7. I'm delighted to have them on board. And you can check out everything they've got to offer at www.brightcoaching.net. including their professional diploma to help you become the best ADI you can be and keep raising standards as you do it. So go and check it out at brightcoaching.net. But for now, let's hear some more from Lucy. I mean, look, I'm sure anyone listening will know that I'm a big advocate for graduated driving licenses, at least getting something across the line. But I'm going to play devil's advocate slightly, and I'm going to throw you some of the common concerns that I hear people have and just get your response to those. So, young drivers being unfairly targeted is something that I hear a lot around this stuff. So what would you be responsible to someone who says we shouldn't have GDLs because it's unfairly targeting young drivers and unnecessarily restricting them?
Well, I'd go back to, first of all, we did some research last year at Break, and we found that 79% of 17 to 19-year-olds were supportive of a kind of a progressive licensing system such as this. You know, we've already talked about the restrictions on freedom and those kind of things. I would also say that I know in some parts of the country, you know, the car is required because the systems are so, you know, the public transport systems are quite not very well connected and those kind of things. But I think we need to, you know, we don't need to focus completely on the car at all times. You know, like if we had a better public transport system, that would alleviate a lot of those kind of concerns about freedom. Because if we don't have to rely on the car, if we have a better connected public transport system that works and is convenient and is reliable and is affordable, that would alleviate a lot of those concerns as well. So we know that young people are wanting this system. We know that their parents are wanting this system, such as soon as they kind of find out about it. We've got support from academics, we've got support from the road safety kind of sector as well. So, you know, a lot of people that I talk to are saying that this is what needed and it's what is wanted. Like I say, by young people, by new drivers, whatever it may be. The message that we're getting back from the public is this is what is wanted and is what is required. So obviously there's going to be some people who don't necessarily like it, and you know, any kind of issues that they have, I'm sure that there are ways that we can kind of incorporate that into certain things. But generally speaking, the vast majority of people are very, very supportive.
It always makes me chuckle when I get a student come in the car and someone will come out like, someone's told me that if I pass my test, I won't be able to drive after 6 o'clock at night. And then when you kind of sit down and explain what the actual thing is, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. You know,
yeah, it's that kind of misconceptions, that misinformation that goes out there that causes a lot of problems. And that's why I think language is so important. Like you said earlier, you know, making sure that we're being clear about what graduate driving license is, what words we're using is really, really important, because if people have the right information, then they're able to make better decisions. And that's what we want ultimately.
So the next one that I came across was it stops young drivers gaining experience. For example, if you can't drive after a certain time of night, then you can't drive in the dark. So if you can't drive in the dark, how do you gain experience driving in the dark?
Well, if you had the minimum learning period where you have driving, you're experiencing that in a learning environment, then you will have the skills, you know. So, and again, it's like you said, it's not for 6, 7, 8 years. This is just for the initial phase whilst people are developing their skills of driving on their own in a car. You know, you want it to kind of be as easy as possible for them. And then once they've built up that experience of driving during the day where it is light and they've got better visibility, then they move to kind of turning those skills into driving at night instead of going from straight out of the test center with the thing and straight into driving at night or at daytime with a car full of people or not. It's just that kind of phased, progressive, gradual way of learning, and we know that it works. That's what the evidence says. So
I must admit, this next one was the only one that I struggled to get a good answer for. So I'm looking forward to your answer on this one. But restricting job opportunities.
Well, as I said, 13% of 17 to 19-year-olds license holders aren't using the car during nighttime for work. I think the question there would be asking employers about why are you expecting young drivers to drive at night as part of your work as well. So the challenge would go out to, having better working opportunities for young people. And, if they want young people to work in those roles, then they need to be able to facilitate that, and if the legislation says that they can't drive at night, then either the organization needs to work around, or, as has happened in other countries, some people get exemptions for that so that they can drive for work to and from the place of work to their place of residence, those kind of things. So those exemptions can happen as well. So, but obviously within strict criteria. So there are ways around that, a number of different ways around that can easily happen, which doesn't mean that they're then out 2:00 in the morning with a car full of people driving at night and all those kind of situations and scenarios that happen, which we know cause a lot of the crashes. So I think it's just keeping that in mind is really, really important.
I might not have a good answer for it, but you did, so I appreciate that. The last one I wanted to throw at you was, people talking about it won't be enforced. How is it going to be enforced? How are we going to keep track on all this?
Well, I mean, that could be true of any legislation. There's loads of ways to enforce this. I mean, one of the big things that we talked about families, families say to me, well, if I knew that this was law, I wouldn't have let them get into that car. I wouldn't have let them get into this, that, and the other. And so that's one way of enforcing it, is it gives the parents and the families and the carers kind of knowledge about why that shouldn't happen, and then obviously, the police are there to enforce as well. So there's loads of different ways to do that. But I think the vast majority of young people would kind of adhere to this. I think that's what you've got to understand. Like, the vast majority of young people don't want to go against law. They want to be law-abiding citizens. They want to keep their license. They want to do all of those things. So it will help the vast majority of people wouldn't just not get in that car, would not get into that scenario. And those that do, that's the ones that would then the police would then be able to pick up. But if you don't have anything, then, anyone can get in the car. So it's always better to have that piece of legislation that is there trying to safeguard and trying to protect young people at all costs, basically.
I like it. And look, my thought today actually was I went for a drive today. I got overtaken. I was doing 30 in a 30 zone and I got overtaken. And I was thinking back to this and I thought, no one's enforcing that, but it's still illegal. There are stuff you get away with by breaking the law because no one's there. So, but we don't say, all right, well, these laws don't apply because no police officers about. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Do you think we'll ever see it? Graduated driving license? Do you think we'll ever see it in the UK?
I hope so. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and so everything is built on hope. I think so, because just in the time period that I've been campaigning, working at Break, I have seen kind of a change in that public perception of, and that momentum. There's the Forget Me Nots Families United group, which is building. I think there's over 60 families in there now. And they've been really vocal, pushing for graduated driving license. I see I see a shift in the way that it is now being kind of portrayed, whereas before it was a lot of focus was on the restriction. Now the focus tends to be on, the road casualty statistics and how this kind of safeguards. So there is a shift starting to happen. So I'm a positive person anyway. So if I didn't believe it was going to come into, we wouldn't be there kind of pushing for it. So I do hope that it will do, just for people like Sharon Huddleston, Ian Greenwood, Crystal Owen. There's many campaigners out there who've been doing this for years, and they have. I really do wish that it will come in, just so they can see it, basically.
And it's now taken every fibre of my being not to turn this into a Star Wars podcast. I've been diligently not looking at the Grogu in the background. Yeah. But let's move on before I start asking you Star Wars questions. Break. Nice open question on this to begin with. Tell me about Break. What's the purpose behind Break?
Well, Break, we are the road safety charity. We've been around for nearly 30 years now. And, so my part is, as they say, is campaigning. So campaigning for zero road death, really, zero road harm. So anything that prevents crashes, prevents road harm, that's what we're there to do. But we're also there to advocate for road victims as well. We have the National Road Victims Service, like I say, that supports over 1,000 families every single year. And that operates right across the UK. And we have some fabulous, fabulous caseworkers who are working with families. I'm honoured to be their colleagues. And then I get to come out and talk about why, all the changes that could be made to make roads safer and make the kind of the system more supportive towards road victims as well. So we'd have that preventing road crashes, preventing road harm, promoting road safety, and then also advocating for road victims. That's essentially what we're here for. And it's, we're not a big charity. We operate nationally, and we've got people, we're all remote now, so there are people all over the country. And it's a great charity to work for. And, we have our Road Safety Week, which we run every year in November, which gets loads and loads of kind of people from schools, businesses, the police, the fire, everybody gets involved. It's really, really good week. We have like education programs that we would run in like primary schools. We just did one with like nurseries as well. And yeah, we're there to kind of educate people on road safety, campaign for safer roads and better support for road victims, and then also to support road victims as well. So we do quite a lot for such a small group of people, basically.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of people don't realise that, like you say, it's a small group of people, and it's something I can be pretty naive about at times. You see the Break website and it looks impressive, and you see you're all over social media, you think, wow, these guys must have millions behind them and just taking over the world, and why aren't they doing more? Then you go, right, no, they're a charity. They're having to rely on donations and funds and fundraising and stuff like that because you don't get the support that you would need. And I think that's a thing that people don't always realise. I mean, even going back, you mentioned Road Safety Week. That was where I first stumbled across you on the Project Edward podcast. I think it was on last year. How big of an impact do those Road Safety Weeks have, do you think?
I think they have a massive impact because it's so far reaching. I remember, I come from a kind of communications, marketing, campaigns background. And so the things we always ask ourselves is like, what's the target audience? And somebody said to me once, for road safety, it's target audience. I was like, well, everyone, because everyone uses the road, And that's where Road Safety Week comes in, because we have lots of different projects and campaigns that focus on this or that and the other. But Road Safety Week, is for everybody. Like I say, we had educators, so we had lots of schools getting involved. We had businesses, like we had the fleets as well, that we worked with a lot of fleet companies. Got the police, the fire, the ambulance services, all those kind of emergency services that have such an important part of, either raising awareness or kind of the after the crash kind of stuff. Communities as well, there's so many brilliant road safety campaigners out there that are, campaigning for safer streets in and around their local areas as well. And I love kind of talking to them and seeing what plans they have and trying to amplify their messages. So it's a really, really full on week of lots of different things. We try and, like last time we talked about, let's talk about speed. And we talked about how the different perceptions of speed, like you say, people, I think we had like 34% of people said that they do drive above the speed limit. We tried to kind of pull out why that is. Why do we think it's acceptable to drive above the speed limit? And one of the things that I remember talking to somebody about was like, if you've got £100 in your pocket and I kind of took that, but then just took like £20, you'd be like, why did it take £20? It's like, well, it's only £20. It's only a little bit. It's only a little bit over. I haven't stolen all of it. It's like, well, that's kind of like when people say, I was only 5-10 miles over the speed limit. That wasn't that much. Still breaking the law. It's still putting other road users at risk and those kind of things. So that's why we think Road Safety Week has a massive impact. It's a huge undertaking by, like, again, a very small team. I think afterwards we'd all have a big breather and have a bit of a sit down and a cup of tea and a biscuit, to be honest. But it's great to kind of get right out into the communities, meet different people, and just see what's happening out there, because people want their communities and where they live and how they move around to be safe. And we just want to kind of promote those messages, basically.
I like it. And one thing I want to touch back on there, actually, because like you mentioned, the messages for everyone. And that must be harder in some ways because, you said the kind of marketing background, it's easier to target a niche. Because if you put out that message, it's going to miss this section. And this section, it can be a bit, I don't know if this is the right word, but almost generic sometimes. And sometimes it needs to be. But it actually resonates with me in a slightly different way, because one of the questions I've been asking people on this series is, why is there sometimes a disconnect between driving instructors and the road safety sector? And I think you've almost put a different answer on that, because you're not talking to us, you're often talking to everyone. So because we know, maybe this might sound a bit pompous, because we often know more than the average driver because of what we do and because we see this stuff on the road, often I suppose the messages that the road safety sector puts out, they're not always relevant to us in the same way. So were you saying that then? That's just brought a different light on perhaps why there's a disconnect there. But I'm going to ask you anyway, have you got an opinion as to potentially why instructors don't always embrace the road safety sector and the road safety sector doesn't always embrace us? Or is it that, as I said, sometimes we have to reach out to everyone?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, really, because you'd think we'd be on the same page. I have had these conversations, and as I mentioned, my dad was retired now, but he was a driving instructor as well, and he's always very interested in what's happening, what I'm doing, and kind of what campaigns I'm talking about, and those kind of things. So maybe it is that I don't really have a solid answer. I think maybe we talk about road safety, and maybe ADIs think that they are embodying road safety by making sure that the people who are moving out onto the road have how they know how to drive, and they have the relevant measures and all the skills and stuff in place in order to be safe. So maybe it feels like our messaging isn't for them. But I'm a collaborator. I've worked across a lot of community action. I think we always work better. We're greater than the sum of our parts. I think if we're working together, having ADI support graduate driving licenses, I think would really carry weight. And if there's anything that we're doing wrong as a road safety sector in order to engage with ADIs, and I'd be open to hearing these things as well, because I think it's really important that we all different sectors come together to make sure that our roads are safer.
I think everyone I've spoke to has said that, it's that warm embrace. So, maybe there's an element of we need to reach out more. But what I will say is for instructors at the minute is go and check out the Brake website. It's brake.org.uk. In particular, the Knowledge Centre, because I've been engrossed in that over the last few weeks, because that is deep. There is an absolute wealth of information in there that I only discovered a few weeks ago. I don't know why I hadn't come across that before, but there's absolute gold in there. But I want to ask you, how can ADIs get involved in Brake? How can we help support Brake better?
Well, thank you. The Knowledge Centre, it's my colleagues that do that. And yeah, I rely on it for every media interview and those kind of things. So the team that we have that pulls together the research and those is absolutely phenomenal at Brake. And they work to such high standards that they've set themselves. It's really, really good. How can you get, well, just, you could, for a starter, you can sign up to the My Brake, which gets you into the Knowledge Centre. It gets you our Brake bulletins and those kind of things. It's absolutely free. And some great resources in there. And it'll show you ways that you can engage with Brake. So whether that's Road Safety Week, whether that's Kids Walk that we've got coming up, or any other campaigns that we're doing. So that would be one way. And just kind of amplifying the messages, promoting road safety, pushing for graduated driving license, sign Crystal's petition and share it. I don't know how many driving instructors there are in the UK. Maybe you do. But, if everybody signed the petition, that would move us very, very close to to getting it into Parliament as a debate. So, there's loads of ways that you can get involved. So the first thing I'd say is sign up to My Break. It's free. You get a monthly newsletter and you get access to the Knowledge Centre, which is like you say, like a goldmine in there, basically.
How many signatures do you need to get it up for debate? Is it 100,000? Yeah. There's 41,000 driving instructors. So if we all signed, you'd be edging it significantly closer. Absolutely.
Like I say, last time I checked, it was just over 22,000. So, if we had 41,000 on top of that, that gets us up to 63,000. And, if everybody then gets, their family to sign it as well, then we should be laughing, really.
Yeah, and that link for that petition will be in the show notes, will be in the company email, the website, that kind of stuff. So anyone listening, go check it out. But I want to take a complete right turn, excuse a pun for a minute, because about 15 minutes before you joined me on today's Zoom, I found your podcast, Proud Changemakers. So I've already asked you if you come back and speak about this another time, but just kind of briefly surmise what this is about now, because I think it's important.
Yes, so thank you. Yeah, I am part of a voluntary group. It's called Proud Changemakers, and essentially we are LGBTQI plus people that work across the voluntary sector, and we've all experienced some kind of discrimination because of our sexual orientation or our gender orientation within the workplace. And what we've done is we've come together to try and celebrate, kind of elevate, advocate, and support queer people that are working across civil society and voluntary sector and those kind of things. So we have a podcast which we talk about, queer issues. So we've got some stuff for LGBT History Month, which is some fascinating stuff about kind of like queer people in kind of northern working class communities in the 1900s. We've got stuff on how to build a rainbow network. We've just done a podcast this week for Lesbian Visibility Week. We've got stuff coming up for kind of biphobia and all sorts of different things. We've got one on the stigma around HIV, and we've got so many more kind of recorded and coming up that are, I think, really, really exciting. I kind of, in my kind of work that I've been doing over the years, I do a lot of work around kind of inclusion in the workplace, how you can make your workplace more inclusive for everyone, really. But I've got a specific focus on LGBTQIA plus community. And I got access to a lot of these stories, and I just wanted to, me and the rest of the group, we just wanted to kind of elevate those and allow other people to hear them, because a lot of queer stories don't tend to get the platforms that they should do, basically. So what I found is the more we've been able to do that, more people have come to us with fabulous stories as well. So we've recorded them, and then we're going to put those up. And yeah, it's a really invigorating space. We talk a lot about joy as well, because there's a lot of suffering that's kind of put on the community, because we've got one episode that's around kind of how charities are responding to transphobic hate online, which is an excellent episode as well. We've got mermaids on there, and we've got transsexual and quite a few others. And yeah, it's just a really good way to kind of talk about things from that kind of queer lens and the queer perspective, because that voice doesn't always happen. So, and we're looking to build like a network of queer people as well, right across civil society, so that no one feels alone. Everybody kind of feels like they've got representation. They're able to kind of connect with each other, because that's something we've found just being creating this voluntary group as well. So we kind of want to share that with everybody else.
I mean, I always look at this from my perspective, which is I am a straight, white, cis bloke, so this stuff, I genuinely find it fascinating. And I always look at it with the approach of, how can I help? Because I've never been in your shoes. I don't know the struggles. So for someone like this, I suppose I'm going to recommend the podcast to anyone listening, with the proviso that I haven't heard it yet. So, but anything that I think can shine a light and show where we can support people, I think can only be a good thing. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to talking to you about that a little bit more at some point. But do you want to just take a moment to point anyone in the direction of anything else you might want to promote, or tell people where they can find you, anything like that?
I mean, the Break website is there. It's all encompassing. There's loads and loads of stuff out there. We've got Kids Walk, which is coming up on the 19th of June, which is aimed at kind of 4 to 11-year-olds, kind of doing campaigning for safe roads around their local communities as well. We always have a really positive response from that. And that, again, it's free to sign up, free for resource. They get resources and all sorts of stuff. So we've got Road Safety Week will come around again in November. There's always loads of stuff happening. We've got lots of research coming out as well this year. And also, finally, is just for the graduated driving license campaign. there's Crystal Owen's petition, which is, like I say, put the link in the show notes. That would be great. But it's for progressive licensing system. Please sat and let's get that discussion into Parliament so that we actually make some real change.
No, great. Well, I'll put links for all that stuff in the show notes, but I just want to say, big thank you for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Yes, you too, Terry. Thank you much.
So big thank you to Lucy for joining me on today's show. Another cracking one, I'm sure you'll agree. And if you listen to that episode closely, you'll have heard me have my little, what I'll call mini epiphany, my little epiphany during the show when Lucy was talking about the message they're getting across and how they can't necessarily niche down. They have to spread that whole message towards everyone. And it really did just click for me. That's where a lot of the disconnect comes from, I think, for driving instructors. If you look at it from our perspective, and yes, I do use the word our because I am a driving instructor, a lot of those messages go over his heads sometimes because they're not aimed at us. A lot of the people they're targeting, sort of the general public, the whole arena, if you like, we will often have a better understanding. We will often have a different expectancy. We will often have a different experience on the roads than these people. So that message doesn't always connect. So I do just wonder how many of us, and I include me in this, whether it's subconscious or conscious, almost take umbrage at that. And that's why I feel like the road safety sector is ignoring us. They're not talking to us. When in actual fact they are, they just have to water down the message a little bit because they need to spread that word to everyone. So, it's no use the road safety sector talking about the goals for driver education metrics, for example, because again, that might be recognised by about 20,000 people and they need it to be recognised by 30 million. So I found that aspect of it really, really interesting. And I think it just ties in a little bit with what I've been talking about previously, which is we don't just have to do this stuff on lessons. We can be spreading this stuff on our social media. So these messages that are put out, whether it's by Break or Road Peace or Project Edward or whoever it is, we can spread those messages on our social media, whether it's writing up our own posts, whether it's doing his own videos, whether it's doing his own podcasts, or whether it's sharing their content. We can help spread that message, much like we can with the Crystal Owen petition that's been mentioned on the show. Links for that will be in the show notes. We can share that. We don't just have to sign it ourselves. We can share that. So I really did find that interesting, and I hope it resonated for you as well. I hope that you found the stuff around the graduated driver licenses interesting, because I think getting it into more detail and really getting into the nitty-gritty of it was what we needed. And one of my concerns has been that there wasn't a straight, this is a graduated driving license, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's never been there, and that isn't there. But talking to Lucy today made me realise why. They can't. They just have to get it in there any way they can for debate in Parliament. That has to be the next step. So I'm even more advocating signing that petition now, because we need to get it up for debate. It's not getting it enforced, it's getting it discussed. It's not even being discussed at the minute. So yeah, as I said, you can find the link in the show notes. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I would encourage you all to sign that petition and potentially share it as well. And I mentioned before about the things that we can do outside a car regarding to social media and so on. But if you want to find ways of the things you can do in car with your students around road safety and changing mindsets and that kind of stuff, what better place to look than at Bright Coaching, who have got the professional diploma in coaching, behavioural change and driver psychology. So head over to brightcoaching.net to find out more about that. They're running these courses a few times every year. Great feedback from the first course so far. So head over to brightcoaching.net and sign up for the newsletter and see if there are any spaces left on the second cohort, because I know it's filling up fast. And don't worry if you miss out, because I'm pretty sure there'll be another one. But if you're looking for something that you can actually bring into the car, this is the place to go. So that's brightcoaching.net. And just a little personal thank you for Bright Coaching for being the sponsors of Season 7. Delighted to have them on board. And I just want to give people a nudge to go to the website www.theinstructorpodcast.com. Over there, you can find loads more information about different episodes. You can find all the other resources I've got, including the paid membership. Two options. You've got the £10 tier or the £22 tier. Both of them have some amazing content. The £10 tier has everything pre-recorded, so you can go and listen to the 77 hours of exclusive content over there now. Loads of trainings around standards check and coaching and mindfulness and mental health, business development, and we've got a new one coming up with Chris Benson soon on how we can help our learners with the theory. Lovely little name for that, the theory of everything. And for that £10 tier, there is a 3 weeks trial as well, so you can sign up for a week, and if you decide that it's not right for you, then you can always leave without paying a penny. Or you can stay subscribed, which would be lovely if you did that. So thank you. But there is also the £22 tier, and this is if you really want to upgrade your CPD, where we host loads of interactive sessions every month. There are 4 Zoom sessions where I open up my Zoom room for you guys to come in and tell me your problems, and we'll see if we can get them solved. Then you get to come and watch episodes be recorded live and interact and ask questions. We do live Q&As. We've got expert session presentations, including the latest one from Lee Sperry on lesson planning. So loads of cool stuff on whatever tier is best for you. But if you don't want to pay £10 a month or £22 a month, but you would like to support the show, you can also sign up for £2 a month. That's just a nice little way that you could say, here you go, Terry, here's a couple of quid towards running off the show. And I will be eternally grateful for that. So whatever works best for you. And again, the best place to do that is www.theinstructorpodcast.com. But for now, let's just keep raising standards.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
So there was lots of unintentional Star Wars references today. So we had Lucy mentioning Star Wars during the show, spoke about Stuart Lockery, who is the Scottish Han Solo, and this episode is being released on the 5th of May, which is the day after Star Wars Day. So I'm going to leave you with 2 Star Wars quotes I think are appropriate. First of all, Yoda, do or do not. There is no try. Very apt for what we're doing right now. But I think this one by Princess Leia probably sums up what we're doing at the moment the best. Hope is like the sun. If you only believe in it when you can see it, you'll never make it through the night.